Welcome back to here at Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about the economy, wages, and what might be coming down the pipeline. So we'll start with the tea and crumpets, a very good place to start. NHS England to cut workforce by half as streeting restructures. They're going to go from 13,000 to 6,500 as entire teams are axed to save money and avoid duplication. Can you imagine voting for a left-wing party and they end up being worse on welfare, public sector employment? The health minister is a power bottom and he's just gutting services. This is happening because Europe is scared Trump's not going to back them against the Russians, so they're having to put more into defense. They're making cuts to international aid, welfare. There was a Hijabi-led charity that just folded in the UK because of those funding reductions. Whether they're going to face Russia head to head is more up for debate, but they could fund an aggressive insurgency campaign in eastern Ukraine, irrespective of whatever peace agreement materializes. That would significantly bleed Russia because we have seen between the Russian armed forces and breakaway republics over 100,000 casualties, and that's not incorporating the ones that will sadly probably kill themselves because of PTSD. It's at a time when Russia has a very poor fertility rate, and the ones who are having babies are the Muslims, Chechnya, Dagestan. They have rebelled before. If they do so, if Russia has to allocate funds to rebuild those regions it's taking over, it's going to be quite costly. And so, will Putin survive? Is he getting too old? Lots of questions, but this is not a geopolitics video. NHS England staff said they were in shock and awe. We're going back to 2003, aren't we? In all honesty, can you imagine if Gore had gotten elected? 4 years of Al Gore could not have been as bad as 16 years of Bush and Obama. We probably wouldn't have had the $5 trillion spent in the Middle East, and even if he gave away some money for green tech, if you look at the size of the Clinton budgets, assuming Gore would have followed that roughly, maybe some modest increases, we might have staved off the inflation apocalypse a little bit longer, although that could just be wistful thinking. Here's another one. Senior TV producers take shelf-stacking jobs as UK industry remains in crisis. I felt very lost and insecure. Senior producers with decades of experience are working as high street shelf stackers, car park attendants, and in pubs as a prolonged crisis continues to sweep through the TV world. Is anyone still going to the theater? Maybe as a gimmick for old time's sake. It's not a great spot for a date unless you already know each other pretty well. Some years back, when the first 50 Shades movie came out, I was dating this Latina, and we go there. We were 2 out of 4 people in the theater at the time. And the scene where Jamie Dornan was using the switch on the girl, that chick I was with just went crazy. I mean, frankly, we probably could have been arrested, but luckily it was a different time, different place. And as for streaming services, I just wait for it to come to the library. Why pay into that? A producer with 20 years experience was working in a pub. Another with 7 years experience was doing temporary labor work. Other seasoned professionals had taken roles including working at supermarket checkouts as classroom assistants and tour guides. Another said he was having to sell my home and retrain and do the letter work. One producer, formerly on a 6-figure salary, who has been living off savings, said, "You can fill the stadium where everyone was being affected. I see how it was about factory closures and high people lose their job and make national news. It's 40 times worse for the film and TV industry right now, and nobody seems to notice." Well, I do notice. You can hear my heart beating. And people notice me. Like, they'll do the little echoes around the name. Oh, good for you. Congratulations. You know how to read. But there's this great myth that holds the British Empire benefited the average British person immensely, which is not the case. The East India Company, which supplanted the Mughals, and that's also kind of funny because modern Hindu nationalists will appeal to the greatness of India before the British came, and in reality, it was this Muslim minority that was ruling them and doing a better job than the Hindus seem to do managing their own affairs. But yeah, the East India Company, it was corrupt. It got loans and bailouts from the UK Parliament, which, funny enough, about 40% of the members of Parliament had shares in the East India Company. But that money didn't make it back to develop the UK into this powerhouse of sorts. Not on the level it should have. The profit sharing with the public was pretty much non-existent. And the regular British people that went there to be soldiers and workers, many of them ended up being debt slaves in Calcutta. When you look in recent history, the last decent ruler of India would be that lady, Madame Frankenstein, what's her face? Indira Gandhi, because she actually understood they need to get population under control. They need to do other. Unfortunately, the current regime is terrible. The world will pay for a long time for the idiocy of Modi and his regime and his little terrorist organizations that run the country. If you look today, especially since the industry departed, most British people, unless you go to a high ranked university, get into politics, you get into business, they don't have an enviable lifestyle. They can mock you Americans, but most of you would not want to trade places with them. "Yeah, but we have free healthcare." Not much longer. They're going to privatize the NHS. They're already in line to do that. So I do feel bad for them. I think we should be opening more spots for the normal English and Scottish people to get out because it's kind of a sad situation. Okay, so United States, this is from Fed News. I kind of had to talk about it. I lost today, can't stop crying. I have 15 years in a Fed job, love my job, love my agency. Today I just broke. I had to take the afternoon off because I couldn't stop crying. Ended up with a migraine. It's so mean. It's just so mean and horrible. Yes, I'm still employed and so grateful. But every day I wake up wondering if today will be the day I get fired. And I see dedicated, wonderful federal colleagues get let go because of one man's ego. This is trauma. I wanted to stop. Now I'm crying again. Sorry for the pointless post. And they were, oh, we're stand with you. Keep the faith. I will say some of these people are not exactly winning converts with their reactions. But see, it goes both ways because the government needs to be reduced. But on the other hand, you have people that literally want to destroy any good career that exists. That's their objective is like everyone has to get to the bottom and be like some 1099, but not a good 1099, like the crappy 1099 trying to scramble to survive in a low wage position. So it's difficult. Anywhere you look, you have to have contempt for who you're interacting with on the political divide. People have asked about Trump's tariff policy, and there's different ways you can take it. It could be Trump, he does as he pleases, basically the classic. He wants to be tough guy, he wants to shake things up. You have to remember he's old, and this is his last chance to really make an impact before he's succeeded by JD. And so it could just be that, shooting from the hip with no plan. Or you could look at it from a grand strategy perspective, like the McKinley tariffs. Jack them up so you have another form of taxation, but you build homegrown industry. The analysis I've seen, and I'm not pretending I did a deep dive, there was in fact a resurgence of business, of industry in the continental United States, but the exchange was a massive increase in prices. And people might say, well, who cares? The cost of living is outrageous today. Yeah, but it could go even higher. That's the difficult part. He is trying to get the rates down. So some have argued this is why he's crashing the stock market. Remember, Trump, up until COVID, was the biggest cheerleader of the stock market. As such, things change in politics. What can you really do? The third interpretation is that tariffs are utterly disastrous and they're going to set people back, potentially create a 1930s style situation where everyone's doing protectionism, and then you have a great deal of economic stagnancy. It has to be accepted, of course, that some of these policies can be a little bit counterproductive, like they fired USDA people, then they were trying to recall them because they're trying to deal with this biosecurity issue surrounding the chickens. Apparently, you're not supposed to eat the chickens that have bird flu, which strikes me as a little odd. You could probably cook it to where it's relatively safe. Or are we getting to the levels of FDR during the Depression where you slaughter 3 million ham beasts to bring down prices? But it's hard to say exactly where things will go. Lutnick has been contradicting himself constantly. Navarro was on CNBC maybe yesterday, spurging out, they didn't enforce USMCA, they didn't enforce USMCA, which might have been in part because of the pandemic, the Biden administration. What kind of surprised me is that Biden didn't make another crack at the TPP, because Quaker Oats' Paul Ryan, even Rand Paul were supportive of it. And the idea, at least in theory, behind the TPP was to create a regional economic bloc that did not have China as a member. So you have that economic strength outside of trading with Beijing and its various enterprises. But in the end, it might have been entirely different. There was apparently a conversation between Trudeau and Trump where Trudeau said if they had fair play, actual free trade, Canada's economy would collapse. And this brings up the age old question of what is free trade if you have subsidies or special tax benefits to homegrown industries. Another matter is the strategic crypto reserve. Trump has been all over the map on this. At one point, he was saying it would include Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, and XRP. They've since argued it will only be Bitcoin, but maybe the others can be tacked on. What I understand with XRP is that they can hold it or sell it, but they're not going to accrue it. So I suppose that would mean a confiscation of some sort, and then they would just dispense it on the markets. So I guess the dream of $10,000 XRP is probably never going to materialize, but who knows, right? Things can change. Trump is very temperamental. One story I saw is there might have been insider trading. Like someone made 2.8 million in the space of a couple of hours, tracked perfectly with Trump's announcements. And I said, maybe that's someone within the administration. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, obviously, people are going to grift. Cynthia Lummis, she wants to finance purchases of Bitcoin by issuing new certificates of the Federal Reserve's gold holdings to reflect market prices, creating a windfall worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Sell gold, purchase digital gold. Simple, non-controversial, and budget neutral. But will they find gold in Fort Knox? We still have to figure that one out. This could go different ways. The ideal approach is that they get the Bitcoin, it spikes, and then they pay off the national debts. I will believe it when I see it. I am a holder of Bitcoin. I'll say that. I don't like crypto. It's funny though, that's something that's changed. Now they'll tell you that Bitcoin's not crypto. And that is the complete opposite of what they were saying just a few years ago. But I DCA into Bitcoin, sometimes $200, $400 a month, something like that. I hope it moons. I don't know if it will. The biggest problem with Bitcoin from the skeptic's standpoint is that the institutional money came in. And even though people suggested it spiked to the levels we see today because the government was spending money, what if that money that was injected into the economy made its way into Bitcoin? So is Bitcoin itself a store of value against an inflationary system, or is Bitcoin being inflated by that system? And let's say you have the collapse that many of these people celebrate constantly, and it seems like they desire. Would the big money potentially withdraw and say we can buy up a bunch of more real estate or land, turn people into debt slaves? Will they hold on to Bitcoin? If they leave, if they give up their holdings, will the price be supported, or is it going to come back down dramatic? And maybe it's only 70,000, maybe it's only 50,000, but will we actually see this Bitcoin at a million, Bitcoin at a billion type thing people talk about? I would like it to happen. I'm not going to liquidate my Bitcoin, but I'm also the one that says I'm realistic, because you can't ignore all that money that came in and then assume it's going to be there in perpetuity. That's the mistake. Not that it came in, recognizing it, but then saying, oh, it's just got to stay and it'll always grow in value. We'll see. Here we go. The Latinas are fighting usury. So they want a 10% cap on the annual percentage rate, inclusive of all finance charges. Those you don't know, higher rates of interest historically were used as a hedge against the potential inability of the borrower to pay. And I'm not going to bore you right now. I'm going to discuss it in the book on the Care Bears in more detail, what happened during the Middle Ages. Although those interest rates were being used in a double sense because they were a means of the king taxing without actually taxing. So we can deal with it at another time. What would be the impact? Well, it's not going to be on me because I have a credit score over 850, which is pretty good for a black man in America. If they follow through on this of 10% and no charges in addition, remember, a lot of our economy runs on cheap credit. because this might just be credit cards, but of course, there's other stuff that could be similarly impacted, maybe included in the bill. Used cars, $29, you drive away today. Payday loans. What's going to occur if lower income people cannot get access to cheap credit? It sounds good, flush all this waste out of the system. But will the economy function? Will this not be a sledgehammer blow? Like if they were to go after these racially preferential loans, the hotel industry probably cooked. We can sit here and celebrate, and many will, and perhaps say there will be a benefit. I just wonder if you're not going to go to some level of Mad Max. You think the urban market is going to appreciate it when they can't drive away in a Cadillac CTS anymore, when they can't afford their lifestyle? How's this going to work? See, things are quite fragile. It's like I said, when you have this Doge, which is a good idea, but you should do it sensibly. You should do it in a managed fashion. And preferably, before you start a trade war in tandem, you should pass some stuff that kind of cushions the blow. Because otherwise, if we continue sinking, like everyone's celebrating because they have a vested interest, and I'll do a separate video on collapsitarians. When I say vested interest, not that they're necessarily going to be well off financially, they just morally want the satisfaction of being, haha, I told you so. It's going to be ugly. And it's probably going to be ugly for you, and it could very well be ugly for your parents, which that might fall on you then if you are have somewhat of a good relation on them. So be careful what you wish for with all this collapse stuff. It brings me to the question of owning real estate. And as you know, I bought a house some years ago. I got in just in time, right as COVID was taking off, although I did miss the massive market dump in March of 20 because I was kind of out of money at the time doing the closing costs, the down payment. But I bought an older house, which was still in solid condition and just over 3% interest rate. Since then, pretty much anything that's gone up on my town, it's 400,000, even if it's the same age and basically no remodeling done. 400,000 at a interest rate that's basically double. And I say, how are you going to even rent that out for a profit, to be perfectly real? This is, I should note, an issue where when you talk about the realities of being a landlord, these people come in the comments being like, oh, you're just a fat cat, parasite landlord. Like they have no clue. They think that regular landlords are in this high margin business. The reality is no, because you are responsible for everything. And this is what becomes kind of complicated. So I was considering maybe some other options, maybe pick up additional real estate. I prefer securities just because when they go down, the worst thing that happens is you have to wait or you go live in a car. But with real estate, it's on you. You're still paying all those fees. And if you lose a source of income or whatever, good luck. So I found one about 40 minutes south, roundabout built the same era, and it says needs TLC. I was like, oh yeah, that can mean a lot of things. Another one, hour and a half, different direction, $50,000. I talked to the realtor lady. She said, well, it needs a new septic field and system put in, but we don't know if the local government's going to approve it because of health reasons. But if you're good at excavation, you could do it. I was like, no, no, you don't want Goldberg in an excavator because I might become Martin Nieheimer or whatever they call him from Treads. Then there was a house, community, same distance, which is known for having a lot of old people, drug issues, and industry basically collapsed. But it was something akin to this because there were a lot of houses in this range 100,000, 120,000. This one, well, my dream as a kid was always to have one of these houses with a little cone turret with the windows. I think it's amazing. And it was just like that for like 100 grand. Had amazing interior with the wood staircases. I think it had stained glass windows. So really fantastic, tons of bedrooms. Now, realistically, you look at it in the inside, the walls, you look at the cone itself, you're like, yeah, you're going to probably have to replace wood, do more insulation. So this becomes a, you're looking at a minimum of 40 to 50 grand to get that stuff done. Now, I'm not like one of these base guys that can do everything with their hands. I can do some stuff, but I'm not a carpenter, nor am I an expert at drywall. Plus, you start thinking, unless you're location independent, you have a tenant there Now, to check up on anything, it's going to be a 3 hour round trip. Or if a lefty liberal comes into the governor's position and then says you're not allowed to evict a druggie, you could be in trouble. So, this is the issue with owning real estate. It sounds good, but it's more complicated. And then you end up having to give a lot of your time, or if you don't want to do that, you have to shell out the money. So, I'm going to give you a story just in line with that. My house, a couple of years ago, I had a guy come out to quote putting vinyl siding on. It's like, all right, simple, do it once. I'm thinking 8 to 10 grand, maybe 22,000. And he's like, oh, and we can replace your door and we'll do the soffit work and it'll be like over 30. I was like, yeah, I don't think so. But just recently, this habanero came out. Nice guy. He's like, okay, yeah, this, da, 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 da. And I'm once more thinking, okay, painting it as opposed to vinyl siding. Oh, this is going to be maybe max of 10 grand. You don't have the same material demands as the actual physical siding going on. He comes back with 18,000. And it sounds outrageous to me. I'm talking to other people that may in fact have a better rate. Although some of you would say that's perfectly normal. You're running a business, which I do myself. You have to pay for fees, insurance, you have to do your estimated taxes. He has a crew. This is totally reasonable. If he has any equipment, rentals have gone up dramatically in price recently. But that's kind of besides the point. It's not the fact that it's this amount of money. Like last year, I had my roof redone, and that could have been an area where some was saved if I'd done it earlier because I had bad advice from these home inspectors, from some of these tradesmen that were saying the roof is fine when it really wasn't. So these meth heads came out and did a repair job and they did it terribly. But yeah, the roof, understandably, it's metal, it's over 20 grand, but it should be good for pretty much time immemorial as far as I'm concerned. But if you're trying to absorb these expenditures, and I make good money as a single person, I don't have to go into debt for anything besides a house. If I want a car, I'll just go and buy, it'll be used. Although honestly, I was in tears. I'm not usually in tears. I usually don't break down, but when I saw Trump and Ellen with the Teslas, I said, I have to buy one. It's so MAGA. It's pro America. I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy a Tesla. Mark your words or my words. The only times other than that that I've really been teary is watching that Iron Giant scene. You are what you choose to be. But beyond that, yeah, I need a Tesla. Anyway, my point is, as much as I do make good money, and it would be tighter if I had kids, if I had a trad wife with a shopping problem, it's not the fact that these things cost a certain amount. It's the fact that our wages are not keeping track with the rise in prices. There was this big fanfare after Trump passed his tax bill the first time around. They said, oh, the wages increased for the first time since I think the 80s or the 70s, but it's not enough. Like for me, I should be making another 50 or 60 grand base to be in a reasonable position. And a lot of people, if you're working fast food, if that's your main livelihood, you should probably be making 25 or 30 an hour to realistically interact with the present economy. And this is what not enough attention is paid to. If you have such a system, I see houses in this town, they're not being maintained. It's because if you're only earning 60 or 70 grand, how are you going to afford a $20,000 repair, even a $10,000 repair? And on top of that, well, why aren't you putting money in your 401k? So you can just figure most people should be making dramatically more money to compensate for how expensive it's become. And this is not getting enough attention from any politician, quite sadly. I'll leave you with this. If I ever hit the mega millions, or if, Bitcoin does its thing, my plan is, this is kind of my unfulfilled ambition. I would go around and I would buy houses like this one that I showed you. Older houses, but still structurally sound. I would have them remodeled. I'd do it through my foundation. And then I would find, it would have to be some reputation-based thing, whether a religious organization or civic group. People would need to get recommendations that they're not, scumbags, right? And just let them buy these houses for, let's say, 50 grand cash, totally remodeled, bunch of bedrooms, good for a family. I would love to do an end run around all these financial investment firms, the government, all this, because it would be great. I mean, you look at our system today, it's fragile because much of it's propped up by credit, it's propped up by the government. But how fantastic it would be if you could give folks an opportunity at home ownership at a reasonable rate and just say, screw all those other entities. That's my dream. If God allows me one thing in life, I don't even care, oh, you got to get married and have kids. If I could do that, I think I would be very happy when I pass. So, yeah, let me know what you think about the economy, what Trump's doing, and are we making enough money?